Hey friends, I'm Mike, a late identified autistic adult, and this is Tea and Tales, the book club playlist where the tea is mandatory and the tales, they mostly invite themselves as we go along. Can I ask you something? When you were growing up, did it ever feel like everyone else around you had been given instructions for how to be a person, but your copy never arrived? Yeah. Mine neither. School came with a list of lessons, but didn't come with a manual for life, and friendship definitely didn't, no matter how many episodes of Sesame Street you might have watched. It doesn't matter. I feel like everyone got their guide to life on the day that I was off sick. I never got my copy. So anyway, I did what some of you might have done too. I spent over 30 years reverse engineering all of the rules to life from observation, like some sort of nature documentary where the presenter also happens to be a confused animal. In the year 2000, I was 19, in the first year of university, and I knew everything there was to know about the first Baldur's Gate, because I'd read the magazines, I had read a strategy guide cover to cover more than once, some of it before I even owned the game. And I've been trying to work out, while making this video, why I loved those game video guides so much. Autistic people like rules is the lazy answer. And you've heard that one enough, so I'm not going to drop it here. But I think it was really this. A guide meant that the next room was already mapped for you. The mechanics of how the world worked. You'd walk into every encounter prepared for the outcome that you wanted. And out here, no one would even confirm that there was a boss fight scheduled, even though they happen. You can probably imagine then what happened in my chest when this book arrived on my doorstep. A strategy guide for neurodivergent life, written like a video game manual. It talks about stats and status effects and boss fights. It has a glossary, 26 years late for me, but so is my diagnosis, so at least the universe is consistent. This is Stuck on Hard Mode by Erin Phillips, and illustrated by Charlotte Grange. And it's for autistic, ADHD and AuDHD people, mostly teenagers and young adults. The premise is that the difficulty setting is locked on hard mode, and there is no toggle, there never was one, so let's learn the controls properly instead. And I know how this looks, by the way. A YouTuber holds up a book to camera and spends half an hour telling you that it matters. Go and buy the book, etc. There are links in the description, by the way, but we'll get to it later. I'm giving away 2 copies. Again, I'll get to that later. You have seen that video. I have made that video multiple times, but this one has a complication that the others didn't, and it's printed on the back cover. That's my name. Joyful, neuroaffirming, and genuinely useful. This guide hands autistic, ADHD, and AuDHD readers the controller. Mike, Autistic AF, YouTube. There is a longer version inside where I have written clear tactics, smart buffs, and co-op play tips that you can use today. I wish I had this at level 19. Small aside, the lead endorsement on the praise page is Aliona Barinova, the motion capture performance director of Baldur's Gate 3. So even this book's blurbs feel like they came straight out of my Steam library. I feel targeted in a nice way. Stick around to the end because I have 2 copies of this book to give away. There will be 2 winners this time, and entering is completely free over on my Patreon. There's no pressure at all. You don't even need to be a member. The free tier costs exactly nothing, and joining it mildly delights the cats. So details of the giveaway at the end, so get comfy. This isn't really a self-help book with gaming. That is not what this is about. It talks about life as Life.exe. A game that you were entered into without being consulted on the settings. Your traits are character stats. Burnout is a status effect. A bit like being on fire. Anyway, other people are the multiplayer lobby. And it opens with a glossary, a book that defines its terms. Before presenting them, I nearly fainted. So for those people that have pre-ordered the book or are about to, and you haven't picked it up yet, what is Stuck on Hard Mode? And, who did you have in your head? Who was it written for?
So basically, Stuck on Hard Mode is a video game strategy guide style guide to life for younger people with autism, ADHD, or both, which AuDHD is what I call it in the book, and I know I hear a lot of that online, so I like it because it's easier than having to say, yes, I have both.
Yeah, it's less syllables. We like efficiency.
It's for young people who are maybe struggling. Basically, I wrote it for, well, if I had been diagnosed growing up, I wrote it for myself as I would have, wanted to have something to read growing up, because sometimes being neurodivergent is lonely, and knowing that there are other people out there with very similar experiences, and also just the video game aspect of it. I love video games, and I love, I just thought it was a really good metaphor, because, you've heard that, we have different operating systems than neurotypicals. And so I thought that would be a cool way to look at it.
Erin wrote this for her younger, undiagnosed self, which brings us to how she found out about her own diagnosis.
That is how I found out that I had autism, was after my daughter during the diagnosis process for my daughter, when I was researching autism in girls and women, or AFAB people in general. I was like, that's me. Why? But I'm not autistic. Wait,
Yeah. That path, finding yourself through your child's diagnosis paperwork, is common enough that the genetics practically predict it. In 2019, a study following around 2 million children across 5 countries put the heritability of autism at roughly 80%. Autism runs in families the same way that height runs in families. So when a child is diagnosed, there's very often a parent nearby quietly rereading their own childhood with the new subtitles and the new language of diagnosis, I suppose. Erin was one of them. And some of you watching this did the same thing, rereading from the other side of the desk. I know that from the comment section and the Scratching Post community. And if that's you, welcome. You are in exactly the right place. If a game manual for life sounds like a gimmick, games are not incidental to this community. Studies have consistently found autistic young people spend more of their free time gaming than their peers. And there are decent reasons for that. A game tends to be honest about itself. Any surprises are built into the mechanics. A button today does what it did yesterday. Effort turns into progress that you can clearly see, sometimes on a bar, sometimes with numbers. And when the everyday world keeps changing its mind about what it wants from you, a world that keeps its promises is often somewhere to breathe. It's stuck on hard mode. I can't seem to change it. All right, quest number 1. Stats and builds. Chapter 3 hands you a character sheet. 6 mental stats straight out of an RPG rulebook. Sociability, perception, neurodexterity, information, bandwidth, and luck. 2 rules govern the whole system, and they're both quietly excellent. Rule 1. There is no mod that maxes out every stat. Nobody gets the full board. You have a limited pool of points, and they were allocated before you ever got to have a say. Mostly by your parents' genetics, and a bit about where you happened to spawn. High somewhere means low somewhere else. The book's actual claim about neurodivergent builds is very specific. Neurotypical players tend to sit mid-table on everything, while ND builds tend to run to extremes. Nearly maxed here, nearly empty there. The spiky profile, but as a character build. High isn't good, and low isn't bad. The number just changes how you play. And then the book does something that I want to frame and put on a wall. Sociability, it explains, isn't about likability. It's, and I'm quoting a book for teenagers directly here, the amount of social fucks you have to give. I did not write that. Erin wrote that. In a teen book, it's the most accurate definition of the construct I've encountered in any literature, and I include the peer-reviewed land. A quick tour of the rest. Perception covers what gets through. Too much of everything, or sometimes not enough, which is where the book quietly explains Interoception to its teenage readers, the sense that tells you that you're hungry, thirsty, or in pain. Neurodexterity is flexibility of thought, from very rigid to very creative. Information replaces the intelligence stat on entirely correct grounds, that exams happen to measure how well you regurgitate, not how much you know. Bandwidth here is your mental energy pool and how fast it drains. And of course, luck. Luck is the amount of privilege you were born into. High luck means good things happen to you without having to grind for them. Low luck doesn't mean good things can't happen, it means that you'll be doing considerably more side quests to get there. The book also talks about masking and describes it as running a neurotypical emulator on autistic hardware. Now, for the computer science mic, that really goes straight to my heart. I get that intuitively. And the cost is your bandwidth. Every hour of parsing drains the available pool. Drain it long enough and you trigger the burnout status effect, where every stat on the sheet drops. I say that I built my character sheet, but I didn't, okay? This is how it would be for the person playing Mike in this simulation that we live in, I suppose. Everything pretty much got dumped into information and perception, and sociability was just left to ride at whatever it was on, which wasn't much. There is a name for that build. It's called software engineer. I'm pretty much maxed software engineer. I spent 20 plus years on the Microsoft stack, building business and healthcare systems that people actually used. I worked in defense. I had a long career in computer science. I got to have a pretty decent career in computer science, working for myself, working in construction and finance and defense, the military, working for the NHS. I built systems for the NHS. In some respects, it's great. My character sheet worked. I picked a software engineering wizard and I got to play one as long as the dungeon was the office environment and I got left alone. And then, just a few years ago, I did a full respec. I went from software engineer to YouTuber. You can change your build later in life, but you don't get any of the invested points back. 20 years in the engineering tree stays spent. So I'm now playing a class that runs on, let's call it charisma and communication, information, the exact stats that I dumped, my dump stats at character creation, when I am functionally a wizard who walked into a bard audition. I am a low dexterity cat. I am a tank who queued as a healer and would like to apologise in advance for ruining everybody's evening. The spent points don't vanish, though. You don't get to re-roll them and move them into something else. You don't get to change your base stats. The skill trees that you have already leveled, they do come with you. Your experience, your XP comes with you into whatever build or whatever role you choose to play in life. While we're talking about character sheets, what does your sheet look like? Genuinely, have a think. Where are you overpowered? And where does Life.exe keep sending you back to respawn? What are you doing? Let me know in the comments below. I do read them. And if nobody has ever said this to you directly, let me be the one. Your spiky character sheet was never a deficit. It's a build, and builds have strategies. And that is the entire reason that this book exists. Erin, incidentally, takes character creation very seriously.
How many Skyrim save files do you have?
Oh, God. I have never tried to count, but too many.
What are we talking? Like how many thousands?
Probably at least 1,000. I guess. For one, I love creating new characters just because it's like you get to think about what you want this person to be.
Quest number 2, status effects. The book files burnout and meltdowns under something called status effects. These are conditions that change what your character can do until they're dealt with. You can think of them in a role-playing game like poisoned or stunned or over-encumbered or just Mondays. It sounds flippant until you notice what the framing quietly does. By framing these conditions as status effects, it makes the state temporary. It is mechanical. It is manageable. It's not a verdict on your worth as a human, or a player in this case. Remember the wiring from the last chapter quest? Masking drains bandwidth, bandwidth triggers burnout, and burnout drops every stat on the sheet at once. The book gives readers, in one simple diagram, the causal chain that it took me, honestly, 40 years and a crisis to see. I know the chain intimately, and some of you have already got your own receipts. I made an entire film about my own burnout. It's the most personal thing on this channel, but it felt like skills dropping off my character sheet one by one, almost like unleveling in a game, maybe. And those amazing abilities that you used to get by no longer worked. Stuck on Hard Mode describes burnout as something that can be self-inflicted without you ever noticing, by running more quests at once than your bandwidth allows. My last burnout was as a direct result of picking every single side quest. I had quest givers offering me the most amazing opportunities and side quests, and I just went yes to all of them and added them all to my quest log until eventually I burnt out. The book goes further. It says that once you've been through burnout, it says that you can learn to recognize the build-up and stop the next one before it lands. You know, autistic people have been describing autistic burnout to each other for decades. There are forums and blogs and subreddits, there are conferences, there are meetups, there are all kinds of spaces where autistic people talk about burnout, the chronic exhaustion, the skills that stop loading, the sudden intolerance of sensory input that you might have been fine with before. It wasn't until just a few years ago that we had our first formal research definition. The paper landed in 2020. 2020. I mean, I'd already been burnt out by then. I was ahead of the literature, which is the only race I think I've ever won by collapsing. This particular study was participatory, and it was run with autistic researchers, and its title is a direct quote from a participant: having all your internal resources exhausted beyond measure and being left with no cleanup crew. Academics have continued to work and have confirmed what the autistic community already knew. Autistic burnout is distinguishable from depression and from the occupational kind, although they do overlap and get misdiagnosed and confused for each other. Formal research on meltdowns are further behind still. Nearly all the meltdown research that exists was done on children, and mostly, nearly exclusively, it's about managing their behaviour rather than about understanding their experience. For adults, one of the most discussed experiences in this entire community is close to a blank page in the journals. Science is still catching up with things that every autistic adult already knows. Burnout is real and it has a name. The research finally agrees. And it's not a weakness. Your burnout has causes. The causes have levers, and it can ease. It's the difference between being broken and being depleted. You won't stay depleted forever. That's what I love about the book. It talks about burnout and meltdowns in video game language, but it doesn't steer away from those topics. It doesn't stigmatize those topics. It treats them actually as game mechanics with early warning signs and recovery strategies. On this topic, the book is already ahead of a decent chunk of the academic literature because whilst it draws from the same source, the 2020 study, that's autistic people describing their own lives, the prevention material, the load management, the permission to log off before the crash, instead of afterwards. I learned every one of those lessons the expensive way. Much better to learn from other people's experience than to learn yourself. The easy way is sometimes better than the hard way. Quest number 3, settings and maintenance. Every game has a settings menu, and the first thing many of us do in a new game is open that immediately. That's the first thing we do. Manual sword drawing, off. Brightness, up, down, just right. Subtitles on, off. Motion blur off, obviously, we're not animals. The book's argument is that your life has a settings menu too, and that most neurodivergent people were raised to believe adjusting it is cheating. Sensory needs, routines, recovery time, the book files them under maintenance, the boring, unskippable kind, like saving your game. It even suggests hypersensitive players keep sunglasses in their inventory at all times, which I appreciated, because inventory management is a subject close to my heart. My last video on this channel is about what was in my bag. I keep sunglasses, multiple pairs on me at all times, which I now understand is my loadout. Thank you very much, Erin. And the direction of travel matches the evidence. Because in 2019, researchers actually asked autistic adults about stimming and reached the conclusion stimmers had been, I guess, singing about for years. It's a form of self-regulation, a tool for managing overwhelming input and emotion, not a glitch to train out. The paper's title is a quote from a participant. Right now, as I speak, England has just beaten Norway in the semi-finals of the World Cup. Why am I talking about football? The football. Well, because it's really strange to see how society accepts, mostly male to be fair, but it's this aggressive exuberance. The goal is scored and the supporters are screaming and they're jumping up and down, they're clapping, they're spinning. What other, often autistic coded behaviours are they showing? Quite a lot. It's a form of stimming. They're stimming, okay? It's not that weird. But it's also socially acceptable. I definitely want to talk more about this later, but another video, another time. There is some interesting evidence one layer down in the character sheet, and that's where we hit the interoception mechanic. A lot of autistic people read their internal body signals differently, and the gap between what the body's doing and what you can feel it doing turns out to matter. Work at Sussex found that gap tracks closely with anxiety. They ran a proper clinical trial, training autistic adults to read their own heartbeat signals more accurately, and their anxiety came down. The book tells its readers to check their gauges. In that trial, checking the gauges was literally the intervention. When a book written for teenagers and a randomized controlled trial point to the same direction. Quest number 4. Co-op, the multiplayer lobby. Multiplayer, co-op, friendships, relationships, and other people. The chapter every autistic reader turns to first, I bet, because it's the system where most of us have logged the most character deaths. Here's Erin.
But it does feel quite lonely sometimes, particularly at the start.
Well, especially when you're young and undiagnosed and you don't understand why it's so easy for other people to make friends and to have these social groups where they feel like they fit in, and you're just on the outside going, I'm trying, what am I doing wrong? I watch the other people, see what they do, try to do the same thing, but apparently I'm not doing it right. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like a guild you don't get an invite to borrow one of your metaphors.
Hold on to what she said. She watched what other people did. She copied it, and it still didn't work. And for most of my life, and hers, the official explanation was a deficit. We lacked social skills. End of story. Now practice your eye contact. And then, in 2012, an autistic sociologist named Milton proposed something that sounds obvious, and once you've heard it, it will stick with you. It's quietly radical at the time, incidentally. This idea that the misunderstanding, the communication breakdown runs both ways. He called it the double empathy problem. We struggle to read them, they struggle to read us. It only ever got filed as our deficit because there are more of them. In 2017, researchers showed people short clips of autistic and non-autistic speakers and asked for first impressions. Observers rated autistic speakers as less favourable within seconds, and it was based on delivery and appearance, not based on what they said. Given transcripts alone, the difference vanished. Then in 2020, a team in Edinburgh ran the children's telephone game as an experiment. A story passed down a chain of autistic people survived just as well as down a chain of non-autistic people. The only chains where the story fell apart were the mixed neurotype groups. Nothing in that study found a faulty transmitter in autism or anything like that. It found two communication protocols that don't shake hands. Network engineers, that was a good one. Let me know in the comments. You heard me, right? I made a TCP/IP joke. Anyway, this just reframes this entire co-op problem. Our multiplayer was never broken. We've been queuing into the wrong lobbies and logging the losses as a skill issue. Try a little experiment with me right now. Think of one person that you never have to translate yourself for. Got them? Notice how quickly their face arrived. That's the lobby that the book is telling you to queue for. The book's friendship chapter really gets this. It isn't 50 pages on how to act more neurotypical. It's matchmaking advice. Find your people. Notice where communication costs you nothing. Build there. The cost of doing it the other way, of masking your way through every relationship, is a subject that I've covered at length, including what it does inside romantic relationships when the mask eventually comes off and someone realizes that they've been dating your customer service voice. The cost of doing it the other way, of masking your way through every relationship, romantic or not, is a subject I've covered at length, including very recently, card on screen and video in the description below. These clips of Erin, by the way, are just seconds out of a 20-minute full conversation, and the whole thing is over on my Patreon for all members. More on that at the end. And the giveaway too, so stay tuned for that. At 44, with a found family assembled the slow way, would this chapter have shortened the search for me? I think it would have changed what I blamed. I spent about 25 years billing every failed connection to my own account. Like, the invoices were real, right? I've been sending them to myself, right? I've been blaming myself. I've been billing myself for every single mistake and every single understanding, as opposed to having this more nuanced concept of double empathy and also queuing in the wrong lobbies. All of this I did eventually figure out for myself. It took me about 2 decades of trial and error, literally learning from books, film, TV, people watching. I have notebooks filled with notes. But would this book have saved me that time? Not all of it, realistically, but maybe half. And half of 2 decades is a lot of decade. And then there's the other thing, the thing that there's no quest log for, which is that I feel like every late identified autistic person goes through it. It is not an optional side quest, it's very much the main line. I've talked about grief before, grieving this almost like loss of identity, almost like a second coming of age, that sort of thing. But there's something else after reading Erin's book that kind of got me thinking. Quests in life are time limited. They only exist in one chapter, and when that chapter is over, they are gone. Gone for good. Being a teenager who understood himself, well, that was a time-limited quest and one that I failed. The friendships in my 20s that fell apart over misunderstandings that I couldn't even see at the time. Whole versions of my 30s that might have happened if the tooltips were on. You know? There are whole versions of my 30s that might well have happened differently, maybe better, maybe not, I'd never know. If I had some instruction, if I had the tooltips on, let's just say, the optional verbiage on the screen. And the fact that there is no save file, you can't load back to the point just before a critical decision or a critical branch. Like, you can't pick a different dialogue option, sliding doors style, like just to see what happens. This run, this hardcore, hard mode run
with no respawns that we know of, this is the run. This is our one shot. This, everyone, this is Dottie. It was Dottie's 2nd birthday with the rest of the Hydra kittens just a few days ago.
Yay! Here's what I'd tell a friend before they order the book. First, who it's written for. Teenagers and young adults. The examples are school, early friendships, first relationships. If you're 40 and hoping for chapters on burnout at work or marriage or parenting while undiagnosed, they aren't massively in here, and expecting them is ordering a Sunday roast at a fish and chip shop. What you get instead, and I promise you this has its own value, is a lens on your own past rather than a patch for your present, if you are an older adult. Hard mode implies we're all playing the same game and some of us got crueler settings. But sit with the earlier Edinburgh findings for a moment and a kinder reading appears. Maybe it's less that your difficulty is turned up and more that the level design assumes a player you're not. Lighting that you can't adjust. Audio mixed for someone else's ears. NPC running dialogue trees that you were never given. Disability researchers have been making this argument for decades. A good chunk of this difficulty lives in the environment, not the player. A strategy guide can give you tips and can give you strategies, but obviously it's up to you to work on your own environment. It can't fix it for you. And I don't hold it against this book or any book. A guide by its nature can only work on the player's side of the screen, right? And Erin plays fair. The book never claims that your struggles are your fault, only that these controls are yours to learn. If you're a neurodivergent teenager or young adult, or there's one in your life, then yes, wholeheartedly recommend this book. This is the manual I reverse engineered myself over 3 decades, handed over at the start of the run rather than the end. In a language that the recipient already speaks, they could save themselves 20 years of side quests. If you're a parent, yeah, read it yourself before you hand it over, partly to know what's in it, and partly because, well, 80% heritability. You might find rather more of yourself in the character sheet than you were expecting. It happens. Ask Erin. If you're a late identified adult like me, come to it knowing what it is. You won't get chapters about your mortgage. You'll get something stranger, a guided tour of your own adolescence with the tooltips finally switched on. Whether that lands as useful or just tender probably depends on the week that you've had. For me, it was both, and I choose both again. The giveaway. I have 2 copies of Stuck on Hard Mode to send out, plus the publisher sent me these really fabulous stickers, which will also be going out too. Full disclosure, the publisher provided 1 copy and the stickers. I bought the 2nd copy myself. Neither is signed by Erin, but both will be signed by the cats, which I'd argue is kind of rarer. Entering this giveaway is free and it will take you less than a minute. There's a post going up on my Patreon right now at the same time as this video on the free tier, which you can join for free if you're not already there. You can comment on that post, then you are in the draw. That's the whole thing. There will be 2 winners chosen at random in the next couple of weeks. No payment, no pledge, no purchase necessary. Although, while you're over there, have a look around. The full 20 minutes with Erin is there for members, alongside access to exclusive members-only live streams, the bloopers and run-ons that never make it to YouTube, and a comfy spot in the Scratching Post, which is our community Discord, run by and for neurodivergent people, and honestly, one of the best corners of the internet. Membership starts at just $4 a month, roughly 1 fancy tea, and you can cancel whenever you like. Everything is linked in the description and the pinned comment below. And if this is the 2nd or 3rd time that you've seen me and you still haven't subscribed, that's the universe telling you that you need to subscribe. So stim the subscribe button on your way out. Remember to hydrate. Hydra insists.